Episode 1 of Ransom Canyon opens with Staten Kirkland riding home after watching the sunrise. This was supposed to be a birthday tradition with his teenage son Randall, but Randall is nowhere to be seen. Their relationship is clearly strained, and that tension continues later at Randall's birthday party held at Davis Collins' house. Now we also learn here that Staten's wife, Amala, died 2 years earlier, and Staten still hasn't really moved on from that loss. Now at the party, Davis gives Randall a brand new car, which immediately annoys Staten. He doesn't want Randall accepting such a big gift, and later that night he tells him to return it. Well, Randall doesn't take that particularly well. He storms out, drives off in the car, and Staten is awoken later by a call from the sheriff's office. Randall has been involved in a crash and he's now dead. The story then jumps forward 1 year. Staten is still grieving, while Quinn is struggling to keep her dance hall going and look after her ranch. Quinn used to be a professional pianist, but when her friend encourages her to play at the bar, she refuses. Later, Quinn heads to a high school football game where she's supposed to meet Staten. Before he arrives, Davis tries asking her out. Staten eventually turns up, but when he sees a memorial banner for Randall, he immediately leaves. Now at the game, we're also introduced to Lucas Russell, who seems to be an outsider at school. He's secretly seeing Lauren Brigman, a cheerleader, and Reed Collins' ex-girlfriend. Reed clearly hasn't accepted that their relationship is over, while Lauren and Lucas have actually been hooking up for months. And meanwhile, Davis is dealing with problems of his own. He's in talks with Austin Water and Power, who want to build a pipeline through the town. The city has approved the plan, but they still need land access, and two ranchers are refusing to sign: Staten Kirkland and Cap Fuller. Davis needs the money badly because his ranch is drowning in debt. Staten though is completely against the pipeline. He believes it could dry out the aquifer the ranchers depend on, and he refuses to risk the land. Elsewhere, Sheriff Brigman brings a mysterious man named Yancey Gray to Cap Fuller's ranch. Now Yancey has been hired as the new foreman, but he's very cagey about who he is and where he came from. Now at said ranch, Yancey meets Ellie, who regularly checks in on Cap and brings him his medication. However, Yancey immediately becomes suspicious when Ellie later finds a newspaper clipping about the Fuller Ranch hidden inside one of his books. And the next day, Lucas's older brother Kit drops him off at school. Lauren is excited after hearing a UT scout was at the football game, and she's invited to a cheerleading clinic in Austin. For Lauren, this is more than just cheerleading. It's a possible way out of town, away from her alcoholic mother and controlling father. Back at Quinn's ranch, Staten helps fix her tractor. There's clearly history between the two of them, but Staten keeps her at arm's length. Davis then shows up at Staten's house and once again tries to convince him to agree to the pipeline deal. Staten refuses, and Davis warns him that a plan is happening with or without him. Later, Staten visits the site of Randall's crash and finds a piece of another car on the ground. This makes him question everything. He now believes Randall may not have been alone that night, and that his death may not have actually been an accident. However, when Staten takes the evidence to Sheriff Brigman, he shuts the theory down immediately. According to him, Randall was alone on the road, and Staten is just looking for answers that aren't there. Staten later returns to Quinn's ranch, but he's clearly in a bad mood and refuses to open up. Hurt by this, Quinn accepts Davis's invitation to dinner. Staten then visits Cap Fuller and urges him not to give in over the pipeline. He tells Cap the ranches are their legacy, but Cap points out the painful truth. Both of them have lost their sons, so who exactly is that legacy for now? Elsewhere, the cops break up a team party, forcing Lauren, Lucas, Reed and Tim to run off together. With a storm rolling in, they take shelter in an abandoned building. Now unfortunately, Reed starts messing around on the rotten floorboards, which causes Tim to fall through into the basement and break his leg. Staten happens to drive by at this point, so he turns back and manages to help get the teenagers out. But when the police arrives, Reed lies and claims he warned everyone not to jump around. Lauren wants to tell the truth, but she's held back. Sheriff Brigman then takes Lauren home and warns her to stay away from Lucas. Now at the hospital, Quinn runs into Staten because Tim is her nephew. Staten makes a dig about her date with Davis, and Quinn finally snaps. She tells Staten she's been in love with him for a long time, and she's been waiting and hoping he'll choose her, but deep down she knows he never will. The episode then ends with one big reveal. Yancey gets into a car and the driver happens to be Davis. Yancey tells him that everything is going to plan at the Fuller Ranch, but Davis warns that there's no going back once they move forward, but Yancey simply says he's counting on it. Episode 2 of Ransom Canyon picks up after Quinn's confession, but Staten pretty much acts like nothing happened. He turns up at her house, asks about the tractor, and Quinn quickly heads into town to deliver soap. Now meanwhile, Staten and Jake look into the piece of vehicle debris found at Randall's crash site. It came from a 1970s Ford pickup, but that doesn't help much, as there are thousands of similar trucks across Texas. Now in town, Davis continues getting closer to Quinn. He admits he's liked her for a long time and gives her a CD from one of her old shows in New York. Now at the dance hall, Ellie also considers becoming Quinn's business partner, but money is still a big issue. Yancey suggests Austin Water and Power could help solve that problem. And Staten, frustrated by the Randall investigation, gets drunk at the dance hall. Quinn takes him home and the next morning, he wakes up hungover to find his father there. Staten's father is a senator and he's back in town for a re-election fundraiser. We also learn more about Lucas. He's now working at Staten's ranch, lives with his older brother Kit, and is trying to keep things together after their father abandoned them. Now at the fundraiser, Quinn arrives with Davis, which clearly bothers Staten. He apologises to her for the night before, but Quinn isn't interested in giving him much. She's then introduced to an Austin Water and Power executive who offers to invest in her dance hall. Quinn agrees after being assured there's no hidden catch and no need to publicly support the pipeline. Lucas meanwhile is hurt when Lauren arrives with Reed. He reminds her they plan to leave town together and they kiss, but she still leaves with Reed. The fundraiser then blows up when the Austin Water and Power investment is announced publicly. Staten calls Quinn out in front of everyone, accusing her of making a big mistake. Quinn fires back though, telling him everything does not revolve around him, and leaves with Davis. Elsewhere, Yancey asks Cap about Staten, which leads Cap to talk about his late son Lincoln, who died in the military, and his wife Ruth, who now lives in a care home with dementia. Later, Davis takes Quinn home and tells her he's proud of her for standing up to Staten. Now at the same time, Lauren returns home and finds a note from her mother saying that she's leaving. The next day, Jake gives Staten a new lead. A chop shop in Bandura scrapped a truck matching the description around a year earlier. Jake warns him not to go there alone, but Staten asks for the address anyway. The episode then ends with Yancey visiting Ruth at the care home and revealing who he really is. It turns out he's Lincoln's son, making him Cap and Ruth's grandson. Episode 3 of Ransom Canyon opens with a flashback to Yancey in prison. While locked up, he gets into trouble with another inmate and reaches out to Davis for help. We also learn Yancey really is Cap's grandson. However, Cap sent Yancey's mother away at Lincoln's funeral, and Yancey has clearly come back wanting revenge. Now in the present, Yancey is getting closer to Ellie, but she's busy worrying about Gracie's reopening. The cooler breaks, so she calls Staten to fix it, much to Quinn's annoyance. Still, Quinn invites Staten to the event later that night. Elsewhere, Lauren worries that her dad blames her for her mother leaving. Things are also awkward with Lucas, who's ignoring her because she and Reed are back together. Now Reed asks Lauren to convince Lucas to keep quiet, and Lucas agrees, mostly because he has bigger problems, including Kit disappearing. Now Yancey then spots his old cellmates at a local store and tells Davis. The two come up with a plan to scare them out of town, but Yancey injures his hand while switching their number plates. Ellie patches him up and he promises to attend Gracie's reopening later. Now Quinn's sister also drops by and encourages her to choose her own happiness, while Kit finally returns home after being missing for days. However, he refuses to tell Lucas where he's been. That evening, Staten's father Samuel convinces him to go to Quinn's event. Samuel is clearly trying to play matchmaker here, but it backfires when Quinn realises Staten only came because of him. Things then get worse when Staten clashes with Davis and reveals that Reed lied about saving everyone at the abandoned house. Davis confronts Reed and is disappointed to learn the truth. Samuel is also disappointed, but for different reasons. His plan to use Quinn to get through to Staten has failed, and when he and Staten argue about the pipeline, Staten finally snaps and kicks him off the ranch. At the party, Kit gets drunk and ends up fighting with Dan, forcing Lucas and Lauren to step in. Afterwards, Lucas and Lauren talk properly, where Lauren admits she broke up with him but she wants him back. And Lucas tells her she needs to end things with Reed first. Lauren drives off upset, but Lucas changes his mind and chases after her. The two then reunite and kiss in the rain. And meanwhile, Catherine shows up after leaving Quinn several messages. She wants Quinn to audition for a music gig in 6 weeks, but Quinn is hesitant and says she needs time to think. Yancey, however, never actually makes it to the reopening. One of his old cellmates figures out what he did with the number plates and shows up to confront him. The episode then ends after a messy night, with Staten returning home to find Reed on his doorstep. Davis has kicked him out. Episode 4 of Ransom Canyon opens with men sneaking onto Staten's ranch at night and stealing his cattle. The next morning, Quinn finds one of Staten's cows in her garage and calls him over. While there, they talk about Reed, who is now staying with Staten after Davis kicked him out. Quinn jokes that Reed being a nightmare guest is probably Staten's karma. Later, Lucas and Lauren spend time together by the creek, but on his way home, Lucas notices the ranch fence has been cut. He sends Lauren home and calls Staten, who quickly gets the men together to search for the missing cattle. Staten also decides to put Reed to work here, but Reed is completely out of his depth. When he fails to lasso a horse, the others, especially Lucas, waste no time in teasing him. Before heading out, Staten stops by Davis's ranch and accuses him of sabotaging the fences. Davis denies it, but he is under serious pressure all the same. If he can't get Staten and Cap to agree to the pipeline, the board will remove him, and he'll lose the chance to save his ranch. Sheriff Dan also shows up at Staten's ranch, but Staten is not exactly happy to see him. He tells Dan he'd rather he focus on Randall's crash, and Dan agrees to look into the chop shop lead, but only if Staten stays out of the investigation. And out on the search, Staten finds some of the missing cattle and tells Reed and Lucas to watch a rogue calf. However, the two start fighting and end up losing it. And meanwhile, Yancey goes to the bar to apologise to Ellie, only to find his old cellmates there. They threaten to hurt Ellie unless he cuts them in on whatever con he's running. Now, at the same time, Quinn tries to give Davis advice about Reed, but Davis takes it badly and snaps at her. Back at Lauren's house, Dan apologises to his daughter for blaming her after her mother left. The next morning, Lucas and Reed ride out together to find the missing calf. They talk about Lauren, but when they find the calf trapped in a bog, they're forced to work together. In the process, they realise they have more in common than they first thought. Davis later shows up at Quinn's house with an apology pizza. He opens up about his ranch being buried in debt and admits the pipeline may be his only way out. Quinn also tells him about the chance to audition for a music gig in New York, but she's torn between staying and chasing that dream again. Elsewhere, Dan visits a chop shop and pressures him into handing over surveillance footage. At Cap's ranch, Ellie and Yancey continue getting closer, but things take a turn when Cap reveals he bought a new cow from one of Yancey's friends. Realising his old cellmates are getting too close, Yancey confronts him and offers a deal. He'll enter a rodeo, win the $20,000 prize and give them all the money. By the end of the episode, Davis leaves Quinn's place, only for her to follow him and invite him back inside. Now meanwhile, Staten is impressed when Reed and Lucas return with a missing calf, and he lets Reed stay in Randall's old room. The episode ends with Dan watching the chop shop footage and seeing something huge. Reed was driving the blue truck connected to Randall's crash. Episode 5 of Ransom Canyon opens with Davis and Quinn together after sleeping with each other. Davis brings up New York, but Quinn says she's decided to leave that part of her life behind. For now, she wants to see where things go with him. Unfortunately, that gets messy rather quickly when Paula Joe arrives in town and walks straight into Davis's shower naked, right while Quinn is in there. That is incredibly awkward, and Quinn storms out, and Davis returns with breakfast to find her furious. It turns out Paula Joe is Davis's ex-wife, and she's also the newest board member at Austin Water and Power, because of course she is. She claims she's back to protect Reed's inheritance, but she clearly has her own agenda. Now meanwhile, Lucas and Reed are getting along better after bonding over the missing calf. Lauren finds this strange, but Lucas wants to give Reed a chance. He also wants Lauren to officially break up with him. Elsewhere, Ellie worries when Yancey signs up for the rodeo. He only has 3 days to prepare, but he needs the prize money to pay off his former cellmates, who continue to threaten him. At the sheriff's station, Dan secretly starts looking into the night of Randall's death. He contacts Tim, but Tim immediately warns Reed that the sheriff is asking questions. Paula Jo then approaches Staten about the pipeline, but he turns her down. She also lets slip that Quinn is sleeping with Davis, while we learn that Staten and Paula Jo have history too. 3 days later, everyone gathers at the rodeo. Staten is not happy to see Quinn with Davis, while Paula Jo uses the event to network with Cap and the council members. At the rodeo, Lucas gives Lauren an ultimatum and tells her to break up with Reed. Meanwhile, Dan quietly questions Reed and Tim about their alibis on the night Randall died. They move somewhere private to talk, but Lucas overhears them mention a blue truck. Lauren later breaks up with Reed and admits it's because of Lucas, but Reed lashes out and punches Lucas. At the same time, Staten finally tells Quinn he loves her and asks her to choose him, but Quinn tells him it's too late. Yancey does well in the rodeo through all of this, and Ellie kisses him for luck before the final round. However, his old cellmates change the deal and tell him to throw the last event. Yancey refuses and wins anyway, and his cellmates try to come after him, but Cap has them arrested for selling him stolen cattle. For a moment, it looks like Cap and Ellie are willing to give Yancey the benefit of the doubt. But then one of his old cellmates warns Ellie that she's falling for a con man, and that Yancey is not even his real name. The episode ends with Staten making his own messy choice here as he decides to sleep with Paula Jo. Episode 6 of Ransom Canyon opens with a flashback to the night Randall died. As someone approaches Randall's crashed car, checks his pulse, and then runs away. Now in the present, Reed and Paula Jo are bonding while cooking dinner at Staten's house. Reed is still upset after his breakup with Lauren, but Lauren has moved on with Lucas. The two are happily planning a future together, although Kit is not exactly impressed. He tells Lauren to break up with Lucas within the month. Elsewhere, Ellie is still unsure whether she can trust Yancey or not. She's touched when he offers to use his rodeo winnings to buy Cap a tractor, but she later spots him at Crossroads and becomes suspicious. Kai then tells her that Ruth has been claiming her grandson has been visiting her. Ellie asks Kai to look into Yancey while she heads to Cap's ranch to search his room. At Staten's ranch, things remain tense between Reed and Lucas. Lucas thinks it's because of the blue truck conversation he overheard, but Staten is fed up with the fighting and takes Reed with him for the day. Over at Quinn's bar, Paula Jo books a space for a business meeting and reminds Quinn that Austin Water and Power is the reason that place is still standing. She also casually reveals that she slept with Staten at the rodeo. So Staten and Davis then show up, and Davis lashes out, telling Staten that keeping Reed around won't bring Randall back. Staten storms off and later gets into a fight with the photographer, landing himself in jail. And meanwhile, Dan questions Lauren about Reed's alibi from the night Randall died. Reed claimed he was with her, but Lauren says he was actually with his friends. Back at Cap's ranch, Ellie searches Yancey's room but doesn't find much. When Yancey catches her, the two end up sleeping together. And afterwards, Ellie brings up Crossroads and Yancey admits he's been visiting Ruth. He claims he's only doing it because Cap doesn't visit her and promises to tell Ellie everything over dinner the next night. Quinn later bails Staten out of jail and drives him home. She tells him it's okay to admit he likes having Reed around, but also makes it quite clear that she and Staten were never meant to be. The next day, Quinn argues with Davis for bailing Staten out, but they quickly make up. She also mentions the drama around Cap unknowingly buying Staten's stolen cattle. Davis then meets with Yancey after realising his old cellmates were behind the cattle theft. When Yancey seems to be having second thoughts, Davis reminds him why he came back in the first place. At Quinn's bar, Paula Jo holds a meeting and reveals her real plan. She wants the council to end Staten's protected well status, then tamper with his wells so he fails the salination tests. The repairs would cost him millions and potentially bankrupt him. Quinn overhears everything, but Paula Jo threatens to take away her liquor license if she tells Staten. Later, Staten drops Reed's things back at Davis's house, and he and Davis finally make peace over a glass of whiskey. Elsewhere, Lauren and Lucas sneak away from a group hangout by the river and find the blue truck submerged in the water. The police are called, and as the truck is pulled out, Lucas notices Reed and Tim acting strangely. Staten also shows up, but Dan assures him they're handling the investigation. The episode then ends with Ellie blowing off her dinner with Yancey. Instead, she convinces Kai to let her speak to Yancey's old friends in custody. Episode 7 of Ransom Canyon begins with Reed back home. A Sheriff Dan texts Davis and asks for an off-the-record meeting with him and Reed at Gracie's. Davis tells Reed to let him do all the talking. And meanwhile, Dan visits Staten and admits the blue truck may not give them much. However, he does say they may have a lead on the driver. He also apologises for not listening to Staten sooner. Elsewhere, Lauren visits Lucas and they talk about Reed's strange behaviour. Kit warns Lucas to stay out of whatever Reed is involved in. Lauren then heads to Quinn's bar for a waitress interview, and because Ellie is distracted by what she's learned about Yancey, she hires Lauren on the spot. As Lauren leaves, Dan tells her to head home as a storm is coming. At Gracie's, Davis is surprised when Dan starts asking about Randall's death. Reed claims he was supposed to meet Randall that night, but Randall never showed up. However, Dan calls him out as Reed originally said he was with Lauren. Dan also has surveillance footage proving Reed is lying, but before the questioning can go much further, everyone gets a tornado alert. At Quinn's ranch, Staten finds Quinn's dog loose and heads over just as a storm warning hits. He helps Quinn secure the animals and prepare for the tornado. Now back at Gracie's, Yancey tries to talk to Ellie, but she wants nothing to do with him. After speaking to Freddie, she knows he's been lying. She tells Yancey to leave Cap alone and get out of town once the storm passes. She also says she won't tell Cap the truth as long as Yancey goes. Meanwhile, Lucas panics when he can't reach Lauren. She left her phone at his place, so he risks going to Gracie's to find her. But Lauren has actually gone back to his house for the phone. By the time she gets there, the storm has worsened, so she calls Lucas using Kit's phone and he tells her to take Kit and shelter at the school. Unfortunately, a tree hits her car and she injures her ankle. Lauren and Kit are forced to shelter together and they bond over both being let down by alcoholic parents. At Gracie's, Reed is clearly spiralling over what happened the night Randall died. He tries to confess to Davis, but Davis stops him. He doesn't want to know what Reed did, but he promises to help him anyway. Lucas also tries to get through to Reed, but Reed shuts him out. Davis then gets more bad news when Cap officially refuses the pipeline deal again. Cap also points out that he has no will, meaning if he dies, his land could be tied up in probate for years. Cap then sneaks out during the storm to visit Ruth. Davis tries to stop Yancey from going after him, but Yancey ignores him and rides out anyway. Over at Quinn's house, the storm forces Staten and Quinn together. A song comes on the radio that reminds them of prom night, and the two end up sleeping together. Now once the storm passes, everyone rushes to check on the people they care about. Davis goes to Quinn, Lucas goes to Lauren, and Ellie goes looking for Cap and Ruth. Luckily, Yancey saves Cap, which leaves Ellie even more conflicted about him. The episode then ends with Reed finally confessing to Dan, but the big twist here is that the person who called Reed on the night Randall died was actually Kit. Episode 8 of Ransom Canyon opens with the police storming Kit's house and arresting him. Lucas wakes up in the middle of the chaos, while Dan later visits Staten to tell him Kit has been arrested in connection with Randall's death. At Quinn's bar, Ellie has been running things while Quinn takes some time away. Quinn is surprised by all the changes Ellie has made and apologises for putting so much on her. Meanwhile, Lucas is trying to stay positive even after Staten fires him. He's worried about Kit not fighting the charges and about potentially ending up in foster care too. Lauren also has problems of her own, as Dan refuses to sign her permission slip for the cheer clinic after finding out she was at Lucas's trailer during the storm. Staten then visits Quinn here, who has been avoiding him since they slept together. Quinn calls it a mistake, but Staten refuses to pretend it meant nothing. She tries to warn him about Paula Joe's plan, but Staten shuts her down and tells her not to save him. At Cap's ranch, Ellie tells Yancey he can stay if he comes clean to Cap. Yancey agrees, but he's terrified Cap will never forgive him. Back at Staten's ranch, Jake convinces Staten to rethink firing Lucas, especially after Lucas suggested using solar panels to help the ranch. Lucas meanwhile visits Kit and begs him to tell the truth, but Kit refuses. Lucas then asks Dan to look into who Kit might be protecting. Dan questions Kit again and quickly realises that he's lying. Elsewhere, Quinn and Davis start to drift. Davis notices she's being distant, but Quinn blames Paula Joe and says she needs time. Paula Joe then confronts Reed over the Randall investigation, but Reed insists he didn't know the truck was connected to Randall's crash. He also points out that his parents are the ones making shady deals. Reed later visits Lucas and explains what happened that night. Kit had helped Reed and his friends out of trouble before, so they owed him a favour. On the night Randall died, Kit called Reed and asked him to take the blue truck to a garage and get rid of it after it had been cleaned. The next morning, Lauren sneaks out to the cheer clinic and gets her mother to sign the permission slip. However, because of her injured ankle, the audition goes badly. Her mother does show up to support her, revealing she started AA and found a job, but Lauren still returns home upset and blames Dan for ruining her dreams. Back at the ranch, Staten rehires Lucas and begins looking into his solar panel idea. However, he soon learns his wells have tested brackish, meaning someone has tampered with them. He also finds out there's a vote coming to revoke his protected well status. Lucas then comes up with a last-minute plan to save the ranch. Meanwhile, Yancey tries to come clean to Cap, but keeps losing his nerve. He tells Davis he's switching sides, but promises not to expose Davis's role in the plan. Later, Yancey tells Ellie he's scared of losing the family he's found in Ransom Canyon, especially her. The two end up sleeping together, and Ellie urges him to tell Cap the truth before someone else does. Now at the council meeting, Reed stands up and plays a video of Paula Jo admitting she spiked Staten's wells. It turns out Lucas and Reed work together, with Reed secretly recording his mother while pretending he wanted to hear her side. The plan works, but Reed gets serious backlash from Davis afterwards. Davis then takes revenge by visiting Cap and telling him everything about Yancey. By the time Yancey gets home, Cap is waiting with a loaded gun. He refuses to hear Yancey out, tells him he means nothing to him, and kicks him off the ranch. Even worse, Cap is so hurt that he agrees to sell his land. Davis celebrates the win, but when he gets home he finds Paula Jo crying in the shower, and the two end up sleeping together. Now while Davis misses Quinn's calls, Quinn leaves her house and goes to see someone else. Judging by her smile when the door opens, it looks like she's gone to Staten. Episode 9 of Ransom Canyon opens with Staten and Quinn finally together. The next morning, Staten tells Quinn he's moving the ranch over to solar, but the cost means he has to raise cattle prices by 20%. Davis also comes up in conversation, and Staten asks Quinn to break things off with him. Quinn accidentally reveals Davis is in serious debt, but makes Staten promise not to tell anyone. She also promises she'll end things with Davis. Meanwhile, Kai tells Dan that the DA is pressing charges against Kit, although Dan still feels like Kit is hiding something. Lucas also tries to support Lauren here, but when she keeps focusing on her own problems, he snaps and points out that his brother is the one facing prison. At Quinn's bar, Yancey gives Ellie money as thanks for letting him stay. He admits he's thinking about leaving town, but Ellie urges him to stay and fix things with Cap. Davis then shows up asking about Quinn, and Yancey confronts him. Davis warns Yancey to leave before his past drags Ellie down too, so Yancey winds up skipping town. Staten and Quinn continue seeing each other in secret and even wear matching bracelets. On the ranching side of things, Samuel visits Staten and argues with him over the cattle price hike. He's also angry that Staten was chosen as trustee of the ranch instead of him and threatens to have him removed. After this, Staten visits Davis with an offer. He suggests they stop fighting and merge their ranch interests, with Reed eventually becoming the heir. Davis agrees, as Reed would get a stake in Staten's ranch too. At school, Reed thanks Lucas for helping him and gives him a favour in return. But when child protection officers show up looking for Lucas, he winds up running away. Dan then visits his estranged wife Margaret, and the truth finally comes out. Margaret was having an affair with Kit, which explains Dan's hatred for him. It also turns out Kit is covering for her. She called him after Randall's crash and he helped hide what happened. Dan is devastated. Quinn later meets Davis for lunch, but he brings Reed along. Davis lets Reed sneak away from house arrest to go to the pep rally, but he also notices Quinn wearing the same bracelet as Staten. The next day, Reed gives Lucas emancipation papers, revealing he asked Davis to help him. Lucas plans to use them as leverage to make Kit tell the truth. At the same time, Dan softens towards Lucas and gives him permission to date Lauren. He also arranges another UT cheer audition for her. Elsewhere, Staten visits Cap and encourages him to make things right with Yancey. Cap admits he once tried to find Yancey and his mother, but failed in doing so. Staten tells him to stop living with regret and fix it while he still can. Quinn is also pushed to make a decision when Catherine returns and asks her to audition. Quinn says she promised Amala she'd take care of her boys, but Catherine tells her to put herself first for once. Quinn performs and Catherine offers her the role. Unfortunately, Lucas's plan fails when Kit signs the emancipation papers instead of confessing. He chooses to keep protecting Margaret. And Margaret then visits Dan and begs him not to arrest her, but Lauren overhears everything and is horrified. At back of the ranch, Cap goes out for a ride and never shows up for lunch with Ellie. Yancey returns and tells Ellie he loves her, but when they realise Cap is missing, they head out to look for him. Meanwhile, Jake tells Staten that Davis is trying to steal their biggest supplier, Billy. As Staten confronts Davis at the pep rally, realises Davis betrayed their deal and declares war. During said rally, Lauren gets distracted when Lucas arrives and falls badly, injuring her arm. The episode then ends with Yancey searching through the ranch and finally finding Cap under a tree. Cap is dead, still holding a photo of Yancey's pregnant mother with Lincoln. Yancey breaks down beside him. Episode 10 of Ransom Canyon opens with everyone mourning Cap. His death hits Ellie especially hard, and Yancey focuses on supporting her through it. 3 days pass and they hold a small funeral and memorial for him. Meanwhile, Staten and Quinn continue growing closer, but Quinn gets bad news when Austin Water and Power demand she return their investment within a week. Staten offers to pay it, but Quinn refuses. Lucas is also struggling here, as Lauren refuses to see him. She feels guilty after learning about her mother's role in Kit's arrest and Randall's death. Lucas asks Dan to tell Lauren he misses her, but when Dan tries to talk to her, Lauren points out that he's avoiding his own problems too. Quinn then finally breaks up with Davis. He admits he knew about her and Staten, and while he's clearly hurt, they end things fairly peacefully. After Cap's memorial, Yancey becomes the sole heir to the Fuller Ranch. Ellie encourages him to stay and rebuild it, while Staten tells him about Cap's regrets and suggests he embrace the Fuller name for real. Yancey turns down Davis's offer for the ranch and then suddenly asks Ellie to marry him that very same evening. Ellie asks for time to think and heads to Quinn's event first. At the party, Ellie tells Kai she plans to marry Yancey. Kai is still not convinced he can be trusted, but Ellie believes Yancey can change. However, just as she's about to leave, a woman appears and claims to be Yancey's wife. Elsewhere, Lauren breaks up with Lucas. She feels guilty about everything and worries her injury may have ruined her chance at a UT scholarship. She doesn't want Lucas throwing away his future for her. However, Lucas refuses to give up and wins her back with a big public declaration of love at Quinn's event. Staten and Quinn meanwhile start to fall apart again. They argue over Quinn trying to handle Austin Water and Power alone, and Staten is hurt when he learns she's considering going to New York for 6 months. Quinn eventually makes Ellie her new business partner and accepts a New York gig, hoping it will help her raise the money to pay back Austin Water and Power. At the same time, Samuel is still trying to take control of Staten's ranch so he can sign the pipeline rights over. He teams up with Davis to make Staten look mentally unfit to manage the property. At Quinn's event, Davis deliberately provokes Staten by bringing up Quinn. Staten loses control, punches Davis in front of everyone, and exposes his debt. Quinn is furious that Staten broke his promise and ruined her event. The two argue again and Staten walks away, leaving their bracelet on the counter. After the fight, Samuel gets exactly what he wanted: public evidence he can use against Staten. Meanwhile, Dan finally listens to Lauren and arrests Margaret for her role in the crash cover-up. Kit is released and Staten finally gets some answers about what happened the night Randall died. The season then ends with Quinn crying as she plays the piano, while Staten watches the sunrise alone at his ranch, bringing season 1 of Ransom Canyon to a dramatic close. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.